All right, welcome to another episode of Taco and Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Brunson. What are we going to talk about today? We are tacoing with John Kurtz from K-State. We've got Texas Tech versus K-State coming up. And so, John, if you would, just kind of introduce yourself to the audience, just kind of, if you won't mind, like maybe a brief background, let the people know who you are, where you're from, how you got to K-State, and kind of bring us up to a quick update to now, or just covering K-State, I guess.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you having me on. Definitely excited to talk about this game, man. I mean, Texas Tech and K-State running the league right now. But so a lot of people probably know me from YouTube right now. I've got a pretty big YouTube following of Big 12 fans. It's just my name, John Kurtz, JohnKurtz on YouTube. And then also do a K-State podcast right now called 3MAW. If you want little update, 3MAW, how you spell that, if you want a little update on what's going on in K-State world right now. We're pretty geeked after the win over Oklahoma on Saturday, but I got there and kind of developed the followings through a 10-year career in radio and TV in Manhattan. I worked at K-Man, a local radio station there, hosting a daily radio show for 10 years, and then was also doing K-State football pregame radio and basketball pregame radio. I did some play-by-play for K-State on the TV side a little bit too, and still do some of that even now after I've left the industry full time and just have a day job and live here in Kansas City now, downtown KC. So, and speaking of that, trying to play to my audience here, you can see my Chiefs Super Bowl poster hanging on the wall with good old Patrick Mahomes, who is one of the greatest blessings bestowed upon my life. So thank you to the Red Raiders for that. But yeah, before that, I grew up in Kansas City. I'm a Kansas City kid. And always grew up with K-State in my blood. Lots of family ties. Was going to games when I was 2 years old. I was born the year Bill Snyder got to K-State, so I grew up on K-State football, and so it turned me into a college football fan. And honestly, how I got into the profession that I did for a while there, and got to this point where I'm at right now. So yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis, I think, of where I'm at.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome. Yeah, we were definitely happy to give you Patrick Mahomes. He's been so fun to watch. There are so many Tech fans that have honestly they've switched teams, and maybe not a full switch, but they have at least added the Kansas City Chiefs as their team to follow. I know myself. I look forward more to watching the Kansas City Chiefs than my Houston Texans.
Yeah.
that was a pretty easy switch with what they've done. I
Yeah.
was a huge fan of JJ Watt, but once management killed the Texans, it was an easy switch for me too. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the Texans. That's terrible. I grew up in Houston, so that's where my allegiances lie. And so now you've got that what is the best jawline of the Big 12? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, that's what the people say. The people said, I believe the exact quote was like, now this was back when I was still living in Kansas. I now technically live in Kansas City, Missouri, but it was top 5% jawline in Kansas is what I was told. So listen, I'm not going to be, I'm going to be a humble guy. I'm going to say, you just make that determination for yourself. But the people decided at one point that was the case.
Fair enough. And so do we have do you want to share like a relationship status? Is there are we swapping left or right? Or do we have any future significant others on the horizon?
Oh man, I tell you what, I could do a whole podcast about being single these days. No, I am definitely single. The dating apps are I would say a love-hate relationship, mostly a hate relationship. It's not great. I could do a whole pod on that. But no, very single. So if there are any Red Raider fans in Kansas City there, the DMs are open on Twitter. It's at Jalen Kurtz.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay, well, let's get to why we're here. Texas Tech is facing Kansas State this week, but go ahead and tell us about the season so far. There was a lot of optimism before the season started. You had a lot of transfers. There's a lot of talent on the K-State team. Maybe Martinez did not live up to expectations initially, but definitely last game. But just tell us the attitude of the fan base up to this point for Kansas State.
Yeah, it's been as you can imagine a roller coaster ride of a season so far, and we're only like a little under a month into this thing. So yeah, the off season was filled with a lot of optimism. K-State had more first team All Big 12 preseason selections than anybody else in the league with 5. So there's a lot of a lot of high-end talent. I think some of the question marks were about depth, but I mean, frankly, I think they've held up pretty well so far with that. It's just simply been a matter of what you've gotten out of the quarterback position because the roster was ready to go outside of they lost Skylar Thompson, who had a tremendous preseason with the Dolphins, made the Dolphins 53-man roster. So, you know, you lost an NFL quarterback and they went out and got Adrian Martinez. And I think the pitch we were sold in the offseason, and I bought it hard, hook, line, and sinker, was he had a terrible offensive line at Nebraska. He played last year with a broken jaw and a torn labrum in his shoulder. Didn't even tell people for weeks he had the broken jaw and was just going out there and still playing through it. So he was really a warrior at Nebraska. He had obviously some pretty bad coaching, and Scott Frost, who was there, but was dynamic at times. He had 46 turnovers throughout his career, which was the problem. But he also he had over 10,000 total yards at Nebraska. So, I mean, he made things happen. And so the thought was here at K-State, better infrastructure. Chris Kleiman sent his last 3 starting quarterbacks all to the NFL, Carson Wentz, Easton Stick, and now Skylar Thompson to go along with that. So I was like, hey, this is a much better situation for him, and he'll really thrive. But what we saw through the first 2 weeks, and they smacked around Mizzou. They beat South Dakota, handled them fine. But through the first 2 weeks, there was not a whole lot going on there. He was not doing much at all. He was playing very conservatively. And it was definitely a concern. I mean, it was something that was being talked about, but after beating Missouri 40-12, he just thought, like, all right, well, hopefully he'll be ready there to unleash at some point. And then comes the Tulane game, which perfect trap game spot. I mean, the Mizzou game meant a lot to people because an old Big 8, Big 12 rival you haven't played in a long time, some bad blood on the recruiting trail there with Eli Drinkwitz and K-State. And so people wanted that. I mean, everybody wanted that game really badly. Then you had the Oklahoma game next, and sandwiched in between there is this game against Tulane, a capable enough team, and just not at all as exciting as the 2 games that you had there. So I think they kind of fell into that trap, but also it just really showed a lot of the issues you saw through the first 2 weeks. The offense couldn't do anything. They were 3 for 20 on 3rd and 4th down, which is just unbelievably bad. No semblance of any kind of continuity or rhythm at all with the offense. And you just thought, man, this is broken. Adrian Martinez looked basically like the narrative was, have they coached him into just being too much the opposite way, the total opposite of what he was at Nebraska, which is so risk averse that he won't try and push the ball down the field or make any plays at all. Is just always going to check it down out of fear of another turnover. But Oklahoma changed all of that. Chris Kleiman said going into the week, Adrian Martinez needed to cut it loose, I believe was the direct term. And cut it loose he did with one of the best performances I've seen from a K-State quarterback in a long time at Oklahoma. That made all the difference in the world. I mean, this team has a really good defense. That's been pretty consistent throughout. They were kind of bend but don't break against Oklahoma, but I think some of that is Oklahoma's just got some really good players. But a lot of strength on the defensive side of the ball. They've been good. And if the offense can continue playing at this level, then they can be the team that I think K-State fans thought going into the year could take the next step from being 8-5, which Chris Kleiman's finished 8-5 twice. The hope and thought is like, this needs to be the year where you take a step forward, win 9 or 10 games, and potentially finish top 2 in the Big 12 and get to Arlington and at least compete for that Big 12 championship. That was sort of the expectation at the beginning of the year. And if they get that team that played in Norman on Saturday, I think that's definitely on the table. But the question right now in everybody's mind is like, okay, is this team more like what we saw on Saturday, or is it more like what we saw against Tulane? So that's really where things sit right now with K-State.
Yeah, and it's funny if you compare Texas Tech and K-State, I feel like there are a lot of similarities actually. Not with the preseason hype necessarily. Well, with the preseason expectations, I guess. There was a lot of preseason hype with Texas Tech, not all of it football related, but obviously we're excited for Joey McGuire, but just with and I think Adrian Martinez had more rushing attempts than completions in his first 2 games. I looked that up, and then Donovan Smith, obviously we lose, our starting quarterback Tyler Shuck, and Donovan Smith comes in, struggles. He struggles with turnovers, right? Though we probably should have handled Houston, but we didn't. Maybe got lucky. Converted a 4th and 20, I believe, just to even the game in overtime, if I remember correctly. And then we lose to a ranked NC State, which higher caliber than Tulane, but there was a loss. There was some, we got that loss, and so you're thinking, the fan base starts then criticizing not only NC State game, but now the Houston game, because the offense didn't quite. There was a lot of turnovers. I want to say maybe 5 interceptions in those 2 games. um, at least around there, close to that. And so there was a lot of, and I'm sure K-State fans are like Texas Tech fans, where they're completely rational. That they see the they see the
Always.
big picture. That there was never any gloom or doom. After those losses, and then we both face, the teams that are leaving, going to the SEC, and then we knock them off, and it was. Definitely a fun weekend for both fan bases there, and so to me it was just funny to see that kind of similarity with, and then both have good defenses. I think Texas Tech defense is actually ahead of schedule, so they are actually stouter than what people thought. I think Tim DeRuyter ended up being a fantastic hire, so we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but Tech fans are ecstatic right now on how that's playing out, especially with the past 12 years and maybe 11 years. Last year was a decent defense outside of like 2 games, but other than that. So I guess you talked about Adrian Martinez and the defense, which was next on my list. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add besides, you covered it pretty well, but let me just double check.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can certainly expand upon both. I think with Adrian in particular, I'm just so happy for the guy because he is, we had an opportunity on my podcast to interview him over the summer, and just a stand up guy. I mean, and you hear the things about what he went through at Nebraska, again, playing through the injuries, playing with bad coaching, playing through years of disappointment, where he's the quarterback. He's kind of the catalyst, and that's a very high profile program with a lot of people that care an awful lot about the program. And so he was just kind of a punching bag for 4 years. And then he comes to K-State hoping for this fresh start. And at the beginning of the year, he turns into kind of a punching bag again, because I think the thought was after Tulane, like, man, the enthusiasm was already killed for this season. This was supposed to be the breakthrough year. And there are so many good pieces on this roster. It's just the quarterback thing is still an issue. And so I could not be more thrilled that he responded the way that he did. And he just deserves a mountain of credit for that. I mean, to be able to withstand, that just takes maturity. It takes poise, obviously confidence, belief in yourself. I just can't say enough good things about him as far as that goes, and really hope that it continues. I think tactically, another thing that they did, he had 21 rushing attempts against Oklahoma, which when he came to K-State, the narrative from him was he wanted to go somewhere where he wouldn't have to use his legs quite as much. He had to do it a lot at Nebraska. He was always running for his life, frankly, and that he wanted to get back to throwing the ball more here. I think what K-State and he have discovered now is that they're going to have to use him quite a bit running the ball. And if you watched K-State play that game against Oklahoma, there was a lot of quarterback power, kind of this delayed quarterback power, which is exactly what Colin Klein ran at K-State. Colin Klein is now K-State's offensive coordinator. This is his first year, which has been another storyline. You have a first-year offensive coordinator at K-State and Klein, who's helped a lot in recruiting and made a big difference in recruiting. K-State's got a stud quarterback coming in next year in Avery Johnson, thanks to him. But the question was like, hey, can he call the plays? And so far, mixed bag, but again, it was great against Oklahoma, and you hope that things continue moving forward there. The defense, I mean, the real strength of K-State's defense is up front. The defensive line is very good. Felix Anudike-Uzama, I would say you need to know that name. Unfortunately for Tech fans, I think they probably do remember that name from last year, the safety that was created in that game that really flipped the game and flipped K-State's season. I mean, honestly, that was a turning point in the season for K-State and a turning point in the Chris Kleiman era. I think things could be a lot different had that not gone that way. But he is a potential first-round draft pick at defensive end. He's been a monster even when being double-teamed constantly. And they have a lot of depth, a lot of really nice pieces. Khalid Duke was injured and out for most of last year, but he's come back and looked great, which has been a nice surprise because he had a really bad knee injury last season. He's another guy. He'll play kind of linebacker and rush end, but really a good pass rusher there too. Lots of depth. Linebacker, not quite as deep. There have been some questions there at the beginning of the season, but I think, you talk about Tech's defense being ahead of schedule. I think the linebackers have been a pleasant surprise for K-State. And then they're pretty strong in the secondary. I mean, Julius Brents and Echo Boydo are two pretty good corners. Brents was first team All Big 12 preseason. And they have a lot of new faces at safety, but they've shown themselves pretty well so far. So it's been a really strong unit, and hopefully that'll continue forward for K-State. But I definitely agree with your talking point. just a quick observation. I'm sure maybe you'll ask me about it later on, but I think you're spot on with your analysis of Tech. I love Donovan Smith. Love watching that kid play. He is the plays he was making on fourth down over and over again against Texas. And I mean, just the entire season, if you go back to the Houston game, like you said, and no doubt that defense is better. And it just looks like a much tougher, grittier team than what Texas Tech has had. I mean, that jumps off the page at me when I watch them. So really excited for this matchup. I mean, you throw in the element of like, hey, which one of these teams can rebound better coming off of the high? You know, I mean, that's a tough spot. If you're a coach thinking about that, how do you get your team refocused after all of it? Both of these coaches, I think, have a huge, maybe not issue, but challenge on their hands to try and do that.
Oh, absolutely. And the names are different, obviously, but you talking about Kansas State defense is like exactly talking about Texas Tech defense. Some little bit of surprise, but the strength is the D line. It's what it has been. They've been applying pressure. They have maybe and I forget PFF or whoever graded a defensive line. They have what 3 of the top 10 in the Big 12 are on Tech's roster. Linebacker was a question coming in. We weren't sure. We've lost some good ones to the draft recently. Enrico Jeffers and Jordan Brooks, the past 3 years maybe. And we're pretty solid at corner and safety. So we felt good about that, but wasn't sure they were going to be pretty like Malik Dunlap. He is a cover stud, I don't know what you want to call it. People hardly throw to him. He's making plays. He will cover. A blanket, whatever I'm trying to say. He's a fantastic. So watch Malik Dunlap, and I forget what number he is, but look for him. And then going back to last season, that game changed the course of Texas Tech as well, right? We fire our coach because we couldn't score in the second half, essentially. And now we have Joey McGuire. Sonny Cumbie leads the victory against Iowa State that does make us bowl eligible and kind of brings a little bit of some excitement. And Joe McGuire is killing it on the recruiting trail with his Texas high school ties. Very tight with Texas high school coaches. That's looks like it's going to pay dividends in the future. So, while we may not, compete for Big 12 this year, you have to think that there's a good chance it's going to happen maybe in a year or two. So you definitely like the direction Tech is heading and then the commitment that we're putting into the program, obviously. So it was funny when you were talking because I was, man, that's Texas Tech. It's the same thing. So we're definitely ahead of schedule. So, okay, so let's switch to your, we beat our rival, Texas. We'll switch to your rival. So are the Jayhawks? Are they legit?
Man, I tell you what, it's been very interesting living in Kansas City throughout all of this because when I was in Manhattan, Kansas does something, you can kind of just hide away from it. Kansas City is very, very, very KU centric, especially in basketball season. That national championship was tough because they basically function as the NBA team of the city. There's no NBA team here, and so casual fans, people who have no association with the school pick up on it, and it's quite annoying. I'm sure you guys deal with plenty of it with Texas in the state of Texas. But yeah, look, I have to give them credit. I mean, it's been the same sort of thing here. A lot of people are talking about it, long story short, in Kansas City, and people that typically would never say anything during football season, which, has been an annoyance to deal with. But I have to admit, I mean, I do think they are legit. Now, what is legit? Like, can they go 7-5 or 8-4? I think they definitely can. With the quarterback play that they have is really the thing. I mean, Jalen Daniels looks like one of, if not the best quarterback in the conference right now. I think based on his resume right now, if the season ended today, he'd be your first team All Big 12 quarterback. And we'll see what happens when they go up against some better defenses throughout the rest of this season. But yeah, I mean, look, Leipold to not only do that as quick as he has here in year 2, but year 1, I mean, he didn't really get spring ball either based on the timing of when he came in. So he was even behind schedule in year 1. It's not even like a full year 2 for him. And that program has been the worst Power 5 program in college football for over a decade at this point. I mean, it's incredible what he's been able to do. I mean, I hate to admit it, but yes, I think because of that offense, it is so good. The defense still has a lot of work left to do, but the offense is so far along. And you talk about being ahead of schedule; they definitely are. So, yes, I think they're legit. They're a bowl team for sure. I think there will be some doses of reality coming here in the Big 12, but they have earned my respect for sure with what they've done so far, no doubt.
Yeah, and then to me, Kansas is one of those teams. It's kind of fun when they're good in football, just because they've been so bad. Now, obviously, we're not. Kansas State is probably not fun for you, for you
Yeah,
guys. But from outside looking in, it is kind of fun. And same thing with like Duke. When Duke's fun or good in football, it's just kind of a fun. It's almost like a novelty. If that without, I'm not trying to
yeah,
be respectful, but it's just that just because they've been so bad, and so yeah, and by legit, I do mean more bowl eligibility than title contender. A title contender, excuse me. They don't have the defense that can hold it. They haven't played anybody really. I mean, I know Duke was undefeated, but also it's Duke. We don't know really how good they are yet either. But yeah, I am on record before the season. I said that Kansas would probably at least flirt with bowl eligibility, and so it's looking like that's possible. They may start out. I think they have Iowa State coming up, if I remember correctly. So
yep.
I think these next two games will be a big indicator, because they could, if they can beat Iowa State, they got TCU. They might beat TCU, and they'll start at 6-0. They might lose their final games, but just the fact that they're here right now, I'm sure it's fun for them, and it's kind of fun, making that kind of proclamation before the season and being somewhat correct so far, anyway. So, okay, well, looking at that, I guess if you don't mind, what are your Big 12 rankings as of now? Whatever kind of ranking you can, obviously we're not going to hold you to it. It's way early. There's no reason to do this other than just for fun. But to me, it's just so wide open of a conference right now that you could almost switch so many teams. But where would you have the Big 12 as of right now?
Yeah, man, it is like that is an impossible task almost right now to who is the favorite? Like, how do you rank teams? Because it just, I mean, I think the thing we know is like there are going to be no weeks off in this league. I mean, if West Virginia, I guess you would put them at the bottom based on what's happened so far. But I mean, I don't think Virginia Tech is very good. But to roll in and beat them by four scores at their place, which is one of the tougher venues in college football to go play in. That's what you're dealing with in the Big 12 here. I mean, this is not going to be an easy league at all. If you ask me to rank the teams, I just continue to kind of default to Baylor at the top, mostly because I had them winning the league going into the season. They did drop the out of conference game to BYU, but an overtime game, and they looked pretty impressive to me on Saturday. And going to Ames, a place where Iowa State had beaten 11 straight Big 12 teams, and that really should have been a 2 or 3 score win for Baylor. The way that they handled them. So I'm going to default to Baylor because of that. But I tell you what, Oklahoma State is a team that's just kind of lurking there, and you don't really know what you have in Oklahoma State. Again, another team that made the title last year, but their best win is Arizona State, who's now lost to Eastern Michigan and fired their coach. So I don't really know what to make of Oklahoma State, but they're going to have something to say about this, I'm sure, too. But then outside of that, I mean, Oklahoma has the talent, but obviously just lost to K-State. K-State looked great, but they have the loss to Tulane on their resume. Texas just lost to Tech, even though they hung with Alabama, which might be the most impressive result individually of anybody this season. If you're into giving out moral victories, which Sark apparently is, judging by his post-game press conference after that game. I mean, you just go down the list. It's like Kansas obviously is undefeated. They deserve at least mention in this conversation, I think, right now, based on how they've started the year. Texas Tech is as battle tested as anybody so far, having played a couple of games that have gone to overtime, playing Texas, playing Houston, playing NC State, and you talk about the defense. I mean, for their defense to hang with NC State the way that they did, and such a great quarterback and a top 15 team, you can legitimately make a case for almost anybody. So, like, I don't have a great ranking right now, other than to say I think I would still, just out of pure default in a situation like this, go with Baylor at the top and West Virginia at the bottom. But I even hesitate there. I mean, they're starting to look a little bit better, and I think they have a pretty good quarterback in JT Daniels. So it is going to be a beast of a league, and I think you're going to wind up with a Big 12 title game with teams with I mean, at the very least one loss, but you may wind up with two and or three lost teams in the Big 12 championship game this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I've obviously very, very similar. By default, I've got Oklahoma State. They didn't even play last week, but they're I think they're the highest ranked currently because of that. Baylor second. I've got K-State third. I had Kansas State as a potential championship game participant. So I definitely have them high. I'm gonna keep them up there. We'll see if they're Jekyll and Hyde throughout the season or if they kind of fix the Tulane issues. You beat OU, so I've got OU four, Texas Tech fifth. We beat Texas sixth. Then I've got Kansas actually seventh. Then Iowa State, TCU, West Virginia. So at least we're right on the West Virginia being last. We'll see if they stay there. I'm not sold on Iowa State and TCU yet, so I have them pretty low. And then obviously the win against Texas, I had to bump Tech up. I'm also a Tech homer, so we'll do it right there. So.
Yeah, listening through to your rankings there, I tend to agree. I think that's a pretty good synopsis of where things are at right now. TCU is a hard one because I mean, I didn't think Max Duggan would play the way that he's played so far this year, so that has changed my opinion to them a little bit. I thought they were going to be in some real trouble without Chandler Morris for a while, but Duggan's been playing well. They're still having trouble stopping people, obviously, is the SMU game evidence, but that was a nice win. But I would still say that, yeah, I'm less impressed with them in Iowa State than the rest of the pack so far. Although I'm really not looking forward to K-State going to Ames here next week either. So I mean, that just is kind of the tone of what the Big 12 is. But I think that's a pretty solid ranking that you have there.
Yeah. And you could almost flip 3 through 9 probably throughout, and maybe even 1 through 9. I don't know. Nobody knows. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. So Texas Tech, Kansas State. I'll let you get situated. It is getting dark on it's like the sun's going down, maybe.
I'm gonna get some light going here. Yeah, got the sun setting on me. Get some light.
So, okay, it's Texas Tech versus Kansas State. So, if Kansas State wins this game, what probably happened?
I think what happened is you get the same kind of Adrian Martinez that you got this past, or at least something to that degree. Maybe that's the really peak Adrian Martinez, but you get something that's a lot closer to that than what it was the first 3 games of the season. That really to me is the key. I have confidence K-State's defense will do enough to keep them in the game, make it a winnable game. And that's nothing against the Tech offense at all. Again, I love Donovan Smith. Really like the way that he plays. But I think K-State's defense has proven that even against Oklahoma, with the athletes they have, the offense they had, they played bend but don't break, and they gave up basically 27 points. I mean, the last touchdown was kind of a prevent defense score for Oklahoma. 27 points against OU. I think that's pretty good and should keep you in the game. So if the offense is going to continue, and basically it really comes down to Adrian Martinez, because Deuce Vaughn is gonna. I mean, we haven't even mentioned him. He's the All-American, and he's just incredible. I mean, you look at his size and you don't think that he's going to be a complete back. I mean, he will pound you between the tackles. He was running dudes over from Oklahoma and obviously making a miss with his insane cutting ability. He's rushed for 100 yards in 9 of the last 10 games, the Tulane game being the only one where he missed that. And he was battling cramps and missed almost an entire quarter throughout that game. So he's going to get his. It's whether or not Adrian Martinez can add something in the passing game. K-State receivers are a big question mark too, and they played a lot better against Oklahoma. But some of it is on them. Can the receivers get open? That is definitely a weak point on the roster. But that to me is really what it will all come down to. I would also throw this in. I mean, K-State typically is very good on special teams. That reared its head once again against Oklahoma. They didn't get a touchdown, but Malik Knowles, when the game was tied at 14, Malik Knowles, All-American kick returner, who's taken 3 back to the house in his career for touchdowns. He had one that was 1 block away from going for a touchdown, but he ran it back into Oklahoma territory and helped jumpstart K-State with some momentum once again. So that could be another thing too Maybe special teams makes up for some offensive woes if they have them. But to me, it's about as simple as like, hey, is Adrian Martinez legitimately, is he back on track, or is he going to slide back? And the Oklahoma game was the outlier.
Yeah, we're definitely aware of Kansas State special teams. That that's for sure. Okay, the flip side. So if Kansas State loses this game, what most likely happened?
Yeah, I would say I think it would be a case of the offense struggling, the offense stalling a little bit, and then the defense being much more like the bend but don't break style as opposed to more dominant like they were in the first couple of weeks. And I would anticipate it means that Donovan Smith makes some really big clutch plays. I mean, that's the thing I've continued to see from him at Tech is like he seems to have a knack for making huge plays when they're really needed and really necessary. So I would say it's a clean game from Donovan Smith, not a backbreaking mistake. He makes huge plays when they need him. Probably outplays obviously Adrian Martinez. K-State offense kind of struggles and the defense is okay, but not great. That to me would be the recipe for Texas Tech to come in and win, which I think is entirely possible. Entirely possible based on what we've seen so far this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think at this point, I know the line is around 8.
It just seems too high. It just seems too high. I can't.
Point
8 seems too high to me.
So, but I would see this as a 50-50, just based on the one, which team's going to show up, right? If it's a team that showed up last week for both, it's going to be a game of ages, and definitely going to, I may bet the Texas Tech to cover, whether I think they're going to win or not, but it should be fun. It kind of sucks we're stuck to ESPN Plus, but you know what, we'll watch it, and maybe we'll get a few highlights on ESPN. We'll see. All right, so if we have some fans traveling for the game, what are some bars, some restaurants? What's the scene in Manhattan that we need to check out while we're there?
Yeah, I can definitely help you out with that. Being someone that spent 10 years living there after I graduated from school. So Aggieville is that's the spot you'll want to hang out in. Aggieville is a collection. It's about a what would I say, like two by 3 block radius place that's just filled with bars and restaurants. So tons of bars. If you want, I mean, I would just say just start walking around and exploring, and bar hopping if that's what you're into and that's what you want to do. If you're looking for food down there, um, if you asked to a man, anybody in Manhattan, I would say most often you ask them their favorite spot to eat in town, you're probably going to get Taco Lucha as the answer, which is basically connected to a place called So Long Saloon, which is also excellent. If you want a great burger, you need to go to So Long. Obviously, Taco Lucha is going to be just incredible street tacos. Make sure and try a Nancy, which is a specialty there. The drink, it's beer, and I think they still use Old Milwaukee. I forget. It's not a great kind of beer, but they mix pineapple juice with it, and it's excellent. They're like $2.50, and trust me, it is really really good. And if you want to upgrade it and do the curtsy, then you get Boulevard Wheat, which is a really nice local beer there, and throw some pineapple juice in it. But I would suggest starting at those two places. If you're into like a fancier vibe, Points is more like true downtown as opposed to Aggieville, and it has a bunch of spots that are a little more geared toward an older crowd, including I think the gem there is Bourbon and Baker, which is a great place to eat like a fancier, more upscale, but it's like tapas, like shareables. You'd get like 3 or 4 shareable things. But it is really really good. Fancier drinks if you're into cocktails, bourbon for sure. They have a ton of different options there. If you want like a brewery vibe, Manhattan Brewing Company is relatively new within the last 2 years. Really good spot, owned and run in part by a former K-State football player. But that's pretty close to Bourbon and Baker. You could even go get your reservation in at Bourbon and Baker, walk over to Manhattan Brewing Company, and throw back a couple of beers. Tallgrass Tap House is down there too. That's in essence a brewery. Tallgrass used to be a full-time brewery there. Now it's just a restaurant, but they have good breweries or good beers on tap that they're always rotating in and out there too. I think I would say that's a pretty comprehensive list. If you're coming in and you're looking for a spot to be, I would say either hang out on Points or hang out in Aggieville, and those are going to be some good places to get started.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I appreciate it. We'll we'll get that word passed along. And then, the fun thing that I've noticed, especially in the off season, is it feels like Texas Tech Twitter and Kansas State Twitter like became best friends. If that can happen, I thought it's kind of funny. I think a lot of that is you in your YouTube, fighting for the Big 12. Obviously, I think had a lot to do with it. But it just felt like Kansas State fans and Texas Tech fans had a lot of fun together on Twitter. And so, in fact, I've already seen some like trash talking back and forth, but it was very lighthearted and very fun, compared to the trash talking between Texas and Texas Tech, which was very vitriol and hateful.
Yeah.
And you know what? And that's okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, they deserve it. So I'm here for anything you guys have to throw at them. Which I was ecstatic to see Texas Tech win the game on Saturday. But I'm with you. I feel like there are a couple of dynamics there. One is, yes, I think there's a camaraderie in all the schools that had to kind of band together to fight for the to save the league and stick together here within the last year. I think that has changed things. I think also just K-State and Texas Tech are both very passionate fan bases that are very active on Twitter and are creative and clever and fun. I mean, there are a lot of good accounts on both sides that generate a lot of good content and good discussion. And so I think that creates a sense of gravitating towards each other. And then I think, just schools that kind of have a chip on their shoulder and always feel like they have to, we're talking about fighting for the conference. I think both of these schools feel like they always have to be fighting for themselves and fighting for respect themselves within the league. And, obviously with Texas right there, Texas Tech has that. K-State has Kansas, which is much more on the basketball side until this year, unfortunately. But, Kansas is the school that, like I said, in the major metro area here in Kansas City, gets more run. You're always seemingly fighting for respect there. So I think there's just kind of a bond, with those things together in both fan bases. So yeah, it's kind of one of those this week where I'm like, look, obviously I want K-State to win, but I would prefer it not be at the expense of Texas Tech. I love what is happening at Tech. Tech fans have just impressed the hell out of me with the stuff at Texas in basketball last year was outstanding. I mean, the work with the TCU, what turned into all the cactuses or cacti this year, that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. And like Joey McGuire, I mean, it's hard not to like that guy. Like, just seems like the perfect fit personality wise at Texas Tech, just so much energy, obviously is recruiting like a madman. You could see that. And now already on the field. I agree. I think the rebuild's ahead of schedule at Tech. So it's fun to watch from afar. It's fun to watch. And I certainly, outside of Saturday, will be pulling for Texas Tech the rest of the year.
Oh, we definitely appreciate it, and likewise, we were ecstatic when K State won. Beat OU. That was just a fun day all around, honestly. And so, is there if I want to fun trash talk Kansas State Twitter account, who should I target? Who's going to be fun to to counter?
Man, it's a good question. I mean, well, you can come at me. I probably won't be. I won't throw much back though. That's the problem. I don't know that I'm going to throw much back. I'm not really willing to do that. I mean, I do a podcast with a couple of guys. Cole Manbeck is just Cole_Manbeck, all spelled how it sounds. I don't know how willing he'll be to respond either. There's just not a lot of hate for Tech there to generate much response. Derek Young, another guy I do a podcast with. He's got a pretty big following on social media. Kellis Robinette, who is our beat writer for the Kansas City Star. Maybe, Bosco's Boys is another really popular K-State podcast that's very fan-centric. Scott Wildcat is a guy who runs that podcast right now and does an excellent job and is as dedicated a podcaster as there is out there. He's usually he'll be out there having a lot of fun on social media too. So maybe that one. If you're looking for someone who's like willing to engage and like be the fan, it's definitely Scott Wildcat. He's a man of the people. So there you go. That'd be one I'd suggest.
Okay, I mean, and Kellis actually follows me on Twitter, so maybe I'll go after him. We'll see what happens.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I'm sorry.
I noticed that.
Kellis, yeah, he if you really want to get under Kellis's skin, what you need to do is tell him that BoJack Horseman is a terrible show. It's his favorite TV show. In the interest of full transparency, it's my favorite TV show as well. But he cares about it deeply. So go after BoJack Horseman. That's a good way to get under Kells' skin.
All right, I will do it. Watch for that. Um, all right, I think that's all I had. I appreciate it. Do you have anything for me? I'll let you at least if you had questions. I don't know if I tried to speak, along with you, but if you had something for me, I can answer them, or we can end it here. It's up to you. I want to respect your time as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to Texas Tech fans. I guess I can throw this in there too. I meant to say this a second ago when we were talking about the camaraderie between the fan bases. I was there. I mean, so I've covered man. So I started working full time with the team in 2011, and it was the odd year. So I did K-State there in 11, 13, 15, 17, and 19. So I've covered a lot of games in Lubbock. And I also was there doing a broadcast for the Big 12 in that was like May. I did the Big 12 track and field championships that were at Texas Tech. The TV broadcast for it on ESPN Plus. Just incredible hospitality. Had a really good time there. The facilities I think are awesome. And Texas Tech's sports info staff is really good. I don't know if people are like aware of that or if people really pay attention to that if you're a fan, but I can just tell you, like, from the media world, I loved working with those guys, and they are like really good at what they do, and the way they treat you in the press box is first class. I was having this conversation with someone else today. It was Derek, who had just covered the game in Norman. Oklahoma's food situation is not great, and I was like, man, they need to treat them like they do in Lubbock, because there is like some places will give you just like a boxed lunch, which is what Oklahoma was apparently. Texas Tech, it's like, there's like 3 different buffets going on, and they'll restock them at halftime. There was pizza after the game. I mean, it was like it was a media member's dream, the way that they do it up at Texas Tech. So a lot of fond memories of my time covering games there, and just the people at Texas Tech. So happy to have the opportunity to speak to everybody. Follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz if you want a little more on K-State. Certainly follow the YouTube channel, just John Kurtz on YouTube, where that's all Big 12 centric content. It's not K-State, geared toward the Big 12. I do a live show on Wednesday and a live show on Sunday that are a lot of fun. And we get a lot of people in there from across the Big 12. So, yeah, follow me. And, we'll head into what should be a really fun game on Saturday. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again. I'll link to your Twitter and the YouTube in the description. So we'll get that covered. I'm sure a lot of the fans, I know you get a lot of Tech fans. I'm in there. Not every time, but a lot. And I know you get a lot of Tech fans that chime in and like to, would they just either give you a hard time or they want to make sure that you saw, like, the cactus, or that you saw whatever it is that was going on at the time. And so it always makes me laugh, and it's always a good time. I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate your fight for the Big 12. That was fun to be a part of with you. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we'll see what happens on on Saturday, and then after that we can be friends again, and we can
That's right.
And
That's right. Absolutely. Well, hey, take care. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, appreciate you.